Welcome everyone. We are in the beautiful country of Philippines in an area of Palawan called El Nido. Very beautiful area, kind of natural reserves, nice clean water, beautiful to go swimming with turtles and various fish and sea coral reefs and some great diving and all that sort of thing. So if you're interested, go and check out these places. Today we're going to talk about what are the countries you can move to and get very favorable tax. So this is like one of the most common things that comes up when I'm dealing with people is they're interested in relocating and they're like, hey, like where should I go? And that where should you go analysis is very individual specific. It's not like there's no one size fits all. There's a lot of places in the world. That's the beauty of it. Place isn't good for you. It might be good for somebody else and vice versa. But if you're looking to optimize your tax, then there's probably a fairly short list of around 20 places I'm going to go through with you that you might want to consider. And so in this video, I'm going to break down by region, Asia, Europe, Latin America, etc., the places that have either zero or close to zero or can be optimized pretty easily around zero, not necessarily zero, but likely so. And also a situation where, maybe you can make it work. Some of these places you won't be able to because, it just doesn't fit your type of income, but I'm going to go through them with you anyway, and at least give you this resource as a list that might be helpful. So let's dive in right now. I think it's around 20, but I'm not going to keep track. I'll just kind of spit them out for you and we'll discuss them. If you have others that you're wondering about, put them in the comments below and we'll discuss them. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. It really helps us support the channel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Michael from Offshore Citizen. We're some of the foremost international tax and relocation specialists. If you're looking for like bespoke, custom, high quality, resourceful international tax planning, we are, like I said, some of the best at that. Not many people can do what we can do in this regard because most are very jurisdiction specific or they don't understand tax nuances. So that is something that we can do, as well as helping you to get residence permits and citizenships and form open international companies, open bank accounts, all those things. If that's interesting to you, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message through offshorecitizen.net. So let's just go through the list. Let's start in Asia. That'll be probably the easiest. And I'm going to exclude a couple places that are like very unlikely that people would go there and just focus on the places that people would go. Okay, so starting in Asia, the main places we would consider are Thailand, although as I've mentioned, there's some changes coming up that may make it less attractive. There's Malaysia, still pretty good, although could become a little bit less attractive. Singapore, less likely for most people, but if you're in investment income, could be great. If you can get dividends, then Vietnam. If in a lot of situations, Philippines. These are like probably the main ones. Sure, you could throw Hong Kong in there in certain situations, and I've done a video previously talking about Japan. Tougher to make it work and isn't really kind of a definite long-term solution for people, but could be considered in there. Those are probably your main ones. This is for personal residence. Other places, people may get away with stuff, but usually not very legitimately, or the tax planning is difficult around it, etc. So these are the first things to consider. Next place to look at is the Middle East. So Middle East is famously zero tax in a lot of regards. So UAE is of course the most famous. Then you've got Qatar, Bahrain, some cases Oman, although they're bringing in personal tax now. It's a very small rate, but still it's something, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. Hard for people to go and live in Kuwait, hard for people to go live in Saudi, so typically not so attractive in that regard, but in theory, those are options there. I could throw Israel on that list. If you're somebody who's like returning and moving there first time, you have this 10-year window. We're not going to probably add that one on because it doesn't apply to most people, but it's something that you could consider. If we go down to Africa, there's of course Mauritius. You could look at that. Mostly people are not going to look at living in Africa, so I'm going to skip over different African options, but some people are kind of interested in Mauritius, and so we'll have it on the list. The next places we could look at are in Europe. So in Europe, the most common low tax places are Bulgaria, Romania, Cyprus. After that, you get some dispersion or some difficulties. You do have Malta with their non-dom program, which if you have the right type of income could be okay. The Beckham law in Spain can be quite attractive for the right types of people. And this dispersion I'm talking about, for example, Hungary is like, it's not as low as Bulgaria, but on the other hand, it's still fairly low. There's a reasonable number of like fairly low places. Georgia would be another one. You can get fairly decent tax in certain scenarios, and so also worth thinking about it. You might say like, okay, well, what about, the non-dom in Ireland? Yeah, you could throw that in there. You could look at, in theory, you could have someplace like Liechtenstein, but in practice, very, very difficult to get residency there. You could look at Andorra. Andorra is certainly one that is favorable tax, so fewer people want to live there, but it's an option. Historically, we had Portugal. It's become pretty hard now to make it work for most people because the NHR doesn't apply to most people anymore. But that being said, still could be an option. If you make quite a lot of money, then something like Italy or Greece could work. Poland has some decent options, so could be a place to consider. And then there's like, if you're earning very specific types of income, then it could be someplace like Switzerland or Luxembourg, as well as a handful of other places in like very niche scenarios. So that kind of gives you the landscape of Europe to consider. Again, I've made individual videos for a lot of these countries. You can go through them, or we can talk about them specifically if you want to reach out and see. But when you're kind of imagining where are the places that I might go in Europe, this is probably that list. The other places, I guess, that are not EU that would be on the list would be Bosnia, Montenegro, and Albania, as well as Macedonia, I guess. So all four of those have fairly low tax. I find that people are much less likely to go to some place like Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia, etc. Montenegro is a little more common, but usually not for all year round. And so, I mean, to each their own, right? But that kind of gives you a bit of landscape. This brings us over to Latin America. And so in Latin America, I mean, you've got various islands, like you got Bermuda, Bahamas, Cayman Islands, Antigua, St. Kitts, etc. So you've got that handful of islands that are going to give you favorable tax treatment. Very few people will do that, but I do have some clients who live in Bermuda, in Cayman, in Bahamas, a couple in St. Kitts, a couple in Antigua. So there are some options. There is a lump sum tax regime available in Anguilla that most people don't know about, so that's maybe an interesting thing for certain people, but usually not the places that people are going to look at. Places that they're much more likely to look at are Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, all with territorial tax systems. You have to kind of pay attention to some of the nuances there, but in theory can work out well. Then there is Uruguay and Paraguay. These are probably some of the more attractive ones, but tend to be less popular for a lot of people to go to. I think a lot of people would say that Uruguay is the more attractive place to live. Paraguay, a lot of people get residency because it's easy to get and to maintain, even though it doesn't really do that much for you if you don't actually live there, and most people don't want to live there, but there are some who will go and move there. Then you have Chile, has a 3 to 6 year program that is pretty attractive. There's some nuances you can do with Argentina for some period of time, but pretty rare to go after that one. So that's like basically the globe. I'm sure there's like other odd little things, like you'd say, okay, well, what about the Channel Islands in the case of UK, or what about Gibraltar? I guess that's another one that you could add on. They're not necessarily so common. Very few people who would actually want to go and set up residency there. And then of course there's like very sophisticated tax planning you can do. Like, you know, there are ways in a lot of these countries to have very low taxes if you have a foreign business, and you can optimize it, foreign operations, and you can utilize trusts, and like, that's some of the really detailed tax planning that we do, but isn't a general thing within the system. So I'll leave those for another video. So hopefully I didn't miss any important ones, but should give you a little bit of an overarching view of the world that reduces you from whatever it is, you know, around 200 jurisdictions down to something more manageable, like maybe 20 or 30. Oh, Monaco, I guess, was one that I didn't mention in there. That's of course in Europe, and zero tax personal, not zero tax corporate, but there's some nuances on how to make it work as well. So hope that helps, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.